Okay, hi. So I'm Justin Clacherty and I'm here to talk about government and tax on encryption and civil society campaigns. I'll try and keep it pretty short because like Scott, I think the panel discussion at the end is probably the best place for a lot of this stuff. I tend to be pretty ranty on these things. I'll attempt not to be. So my name's Justin Clacherty. I'm Managing Director of Redfish Group. Just starting up Redfish CSERT, founder of FutureWise, and recently became a member of the board of the Australian Privacy Foundation. I'm on Twitter and I rant a lot there and I swear a lot. So if you want to follow me, you can, but be aware that there's lots of swearing. So first of all, the government policy and the current state of things. As you can have probably heard already through Scott and Angela, it's pretty bad. What's happening at the moment is that we're really moving a bit towards a surveillance state, and I don't think that's really overstating things. We've had data retention come in. Previous to that, there was attempts to do censorship of the internet. That was one campaign which was successful, thankfully. The capability which people are hearing about now. Can you hear that? Yeah. People are hearing about now because of COAG, but it's really been around for quite a while. It was announced in 2015. There were some vague community interactions with it to begin with. But the media is really only taking notice of it now, which is quite concerning. Well, KNX Web Services is not related to anything there. You've got the Digital Transformation Agency, which is wanting to set up effectively the Australia card, but electronically. And the greater thing that's going on there is that people may or may not realise this is likely to be linked into the capability, so the facial recognition systems, which are, so you'll be linked in with your one and only ID to facial recognition systems that all of the state governments and federal governments have access to. And today, I think it was the Prime Minister announced something about private organisations being able to have access to this so that they could link it in for their CCTV, which is really worrying from my perspective. I don't know about everyone else. Then you've got census fail, robo-debt, war on maths. It's just never ending, really. There was also recently something to do with, I think last year it came into effect that effectively information security specialists doing their job were breaking the law, to do with looking at encryption and really talking about anything to do with encryption. So where we're at is not a good place, and we're moving further towards a surveillance state. So how did we get here? Well, it's been going on for a while. Things obviously accelerated once we had our resident metadata expert, George Brandis, in the AG's seat. Basically, the Attorney General's Department has been pushing a lot of this stuff for years, and they're just looking for an Attorney General who's weak or stupid enough to actually push this stuff forward and let it get through. It really is, as Scott was saying, a bit of a softly approach from law enforcement agencies where they'll ask for as much as they can get, may pare it back a bit in the consultancy period if Labor get a spine. And then they'll just ask for it again in 12 to 18 months. So the way we end up getting these things through is that it's just a constant assault on our privacy, our digital footprint, if you will. When we do get consultations, it's really not very meaningful. They do it through privacy impact assessments. Sometimes those are made internally. So that was the case with, I think, census fail, with robo-debt. There was a privacy impact assessment study done on that, but they did it all internally and it wasn't well done once, which was what came out in the Senate inquiry into it. And also through formal Senate proceedings. The problems here is that the experts and civil society tend to be ignored with this. So mandatory data retention is a really good example of this. There were 2 Senate inquiries into it. Both had unprecedented number of responses to the Senate inquiry, and they were overwhelmingly against data retention. But we got it. So civil society said no. Experts said no. Industry said no. We still have it. How does that happen? The other thing is what Scott mentioned, that there's very little debate, because the moment something's labelled as national security, it just becomes bipartisan. It's weird because there really is no, you don't have that left-right dichotomy when it comes to privacy and these sort of surveillance systems. Most people are against this, yet both parties who are representing everyone are for it. So the problem here is essentially, well, politicians, but I'm obviously going to say that because I don't like politicians. Sorry, Scott. They tend to have little understanding of the issues. They don't really seem to want to be schooled on it either. For them, they're talking about technology policy in a lot of instances, and to me, it's just really not good enough that politicians today, where they're passing legislation that's aimed at regulating or has far-reaching hooks into technology, don't understand technology. It's ridiculous that you have a Prime Minister that'll get up and say, well, I'm no Bill Gates. Who cares? You're writing legislation that is affecting the community, that is affecting our data, and is affecting how the commerce is run in the country. You need to understand this, or at least listen to people who do. Why does it matter? Well, breaking encryption, it undermines privacy. It undermines commerce. It undermines the economy. And information security is another thing that you have with it. If you don't have your data safe, then it's pretty much open to the world. If you undermine encryption, it's not just state actors that you're going to be exposing your data to. So it's not just the Australian government or the US government or any of the Five Eyes. This stuff will get out there to organised crime. That's what happens. It's as simple as that. If there's a hole in there, then criminal actors will find it and they will get your data and they'll use it. And you see data breaches coming out every day. So now a bit about civil society. So society and the media, and I'm going to have a bit of a bitch about the media here as well. So is there any media in here? No? Good. So we're very much let down by the media. Again, it's similar to the politicians. They don't necessarily understand it. There are a few coming up that do, which is quite good. But for mainstream sort of things that mums and dads are watching on television, those reporters or personalities just don't understand what's going on there, and quite frankly, they don't care. Reporters often don't have the time to really look into complex problems and report on them effectively. So for issues to do with technology, they're a complex problem. That's what they are. So you can't put that into a soundbite, and that's not something that is very easy for the media to get out to us. Because of this, they tend to become just broadcasting the talking points from the ministers. I find it very frustrating. I'm sure many others do as well, when the minister comes out with some national security advice and the bulk of the reporting is reading out the minister's press release. Many of them might sit in, if it's actually an announcement where the minister's available, the questions tend to be not very deep, and that it shows very little understanding of what's going on. So you can't get to the crux of the problem. And if we don't do that, society as a whole doesn't know what the issue is, and we're ill-informed, and an ill-informed society can't give consent on any of this legislation. We can't give consent on giving away our data. For instance, the the latest thing with the capability, so the facial recognition system stuff that's gone through COAG, that data was all collected for your licenses. Did you give consent for that data, so your photos, to be given to a federal law enforcement agency that can then be broadcast around to every other law enforcement agency in the country and used for a one-to-many facial recognition system? You didn't. Where's the consent on any of the privacy data that you're working on here? So now onto civil society groups. We've got a number of them, and most of them are kind of represented with the speakers tonight. So there's Australian Privacy Foundation, which is quite well known and gets a little bit of a say in the Senate committees that come up, which is good. Digital Rights Watch Australia, which is a newer organisation aiming at broader digital rights rather than just privacy. Electronic Frontiers Australia, and FutureWise, which is my own one. We have a broader technology background that we look at technology policy as well as health and education and how those interact. Now, it's great to have those, but the problem we have with the civil society groups is they're not very well financed. Australia is really a very small country, so 24 million people. That we don't have a lot of philanthropy towards these sorts of things, and without that ingrained libertarian attitude that you tend to get in, say, the US, and the constitutional protections that you get from other countries, we really don't tend to understand as a society when our privacy or our rights are being abused by the government. As a result, we tend not to finance a lot of the civil society groups who are trying their best to fight for us. And this becomes a problem because we tend to be often the canary in the coal mine for these sorts of legislation. So mandatory data retention, we got that in, and now we're the poster boy for it. When another democratic country wants to put this legislation through, they can just point at Australia and go, there's a democratic country that's doing this stuff. Why can't we? So there really needs to be a way to get civil society to get enough financing to do some of the campaigns that are required to stop this sort of legislation from getting through, which is what Angela and Scott were talking about earlier. There's some good activists around. Asher Wolf did a really good job of pulling together a lot of disparate people and organisations to push the Robodebt backlash, and that got somewhere, but there's really no money or resources, and we're relying on time of people who are quite often either very busy professionals or very busy mums and dads who just don't have a lot of time to put towards this when they're doing it basically because they're trying to make society better as a whole. And people just need to remember that this is affecting everyone. As I said, there's no left-right dichotomy on this. We've got to just stop and not think about that and just look straight at the issues and how they're affecting everyone and not worry about, is this a Labor issue? Is this a Liberal issue? Is this a Greens issue? We really need to look at how it's affecting society and what we can do to stop these sorts of things from happening. People need to support the groups that are fighting for us. And as Angela said, speak to politicians. Unless you actually get in there and speak to them, whether by email or on the phone, tweeting at them won't work. They just ignore it. Maybe swearing at them won't either. But really, you need to make an effort and actually speak to them, and they need to know that these things are important. These things are important to people, and that if they go against them, then there's something that's going to happen there, and they're going to lose their jobs. So that's pretty much it for me. I will probably be more ranty during the panel discussion, so I'll hand it on to, I think Michael is next. Break? Okay, 10-minute break. Excellent.